Thank you for joining me. I'm glad you're here. My name is Jarrell. I develop games for a living. Today, this episode is a request. I've received many messages and comments from people asking me to cover this topic. So I want to help people learn game development, and I want to help developers improve their abilities by expanding their understanding of game design philosophy and games as an interactive media. So this is a requested topic. I will be discussing visual novels and how Mixtape compares to visual novels as games. So I do not enjoy talking about Mixtape, and that is because I dislike seeing incompetence and mediocrity being celebrated and rewarded the way that games media is doing for Mixtape. I want the artists, writers, and game developers of the future to do a much better job than what we are doing right now. And in order to do that, people need to learn. They need to have a stronger understanding. So today I will explain visual novels and how Mixtape compares to games in that genre. I will briefly discuss the story of Mixtape, but I won't go too deep into the topic because I don't enjoy talking about Mixtape. I will set a viewing goal. If this video hits 20,000 views, then I will create and upload a dissection and explanation of why Mixtape story is so awful, why the writing is atrocious, and I will explain what you can learn from Mixtape so you can improve your own writing. So if you want to see that video, you can engage, use your algorithm juice, you can share the video. I'm personally hoping we don't hit 20,000 because I don't enjoy talking about Mixtape. I just don't enjoy mediocrity. So you may be able to tell today's environment is 90s themed. Just in case, I was just thinking, just in case you don't actually like today's video, I can at least emotionally manipulate you through the use of weaponized nostalgia. Take a look at the environment. Do you remember this? Do you remember Pikachu? Do you remember this? Do you remember tape cassettes? Do you remember this? Oh, whoa, VHS and tape cassettes. Ooh, look. Ooh, wow. You remember that from the 90s? Do you remember this? Oh, Pikachu. Do you remember that? Do you remember Tamagotchi? Do you remember Pokemon Pikachu and Tamagotchi? Do you remember that? Do you remember Game Boy? Do you remember that? Ooh, look, it's Pokemon Blue back there. Look at that. Do you remember this? The Game Gear. Oh, wow, I remember Game Gear. Oh, look, I lost my battery panels on that. My battery covers. Do you remember those? Now, I want you to pay close attention to the items that I've just shown you. Remember these, because these items that I've shown you are going to contribute in a huge way to the end point at the end of this episode. So let's discuss visual novels. How does Mixtape compare to visual novels? At the end, I will share two brief comparisons to games in the visual genre. And hopefully that will wrap everything all up together. So please try and remember these items, okay? So, visual novels have gameplay. They tend to have gameplay, but it tends to be more free-form, more so than genres like JRPGs or fighting games. The visual novel genre allows for more creativity or lack thereof. I will use two other games as examples again. So in general, visual novels have some degree of interaction, of inspecting environments, gaining items which are used to progress the plot, and sometimes a degree of traversal. So I'm going to discuss three key gameplay components that we tend to find in visual novel games. And yes, I believe that visual novels are games, but it depends on the software title, because some just don't really have gameplay, and hopefully through this discussion you'll understand my reasoning here is that some visual novels are games, others not so much. They're just something, just an interactive visual storytelling medium. So, three key gameplay components. The first is traversal, and that is that players must navigate environments in order to progress the plot. Players have to find the right place to go, or the plot will not proceed. That is traversal. Second is the acquisition of information. Where must the player go, and which other characters must the player interact with in order to acquire information necessary for the plot to proceed. For example, a character might say, oh, you're not allowed to leave your house unless you ask your mom, what she needs from the grocery store. So now you have to traverse the house, and then you have to interact with the mother character, acquire the information. The mother says, these are the items I need from the grocery store. Then you may leave and go to the grocery store. That allows the plot to proceed. Lastly is the acquisition of key item. Where must the player go, and which objects must the player interact with in order to acquire information necessary for the plot to proceed. In some games, such as Phoenix Wright, you will see the item is added to the inventory. Games don't necessarily need to have a visible inventory. It could just be part of the plot where a character says that they've picked up an item, and then that is part of the game logic. You don't necessarily need to have a visible inventory that you can open, but some games do. I think that kind of mechanic really contributes to making people feel more involved. If they can open their inventory and look at their items, it allows players to engage a bit more with the intellectual side of the game, is thinking about the item, thinking about where it might be useful, and it gives players hints on where they should go next. So again, those three key gameplay components are traversal, acquisition of information, and acquisition of key item. So how does the game communicate these requirements to the player? What does the game do to help the player understand what they should do next through the use of those three gameplay components? So are there guardrails that force the player into fulfilling those key gameplay components, into completing their task? In the case of Mixtape, the game just forces the player into doing the right thing anyway. The game always forces the player into moving into the right location, into interacting with characters, into interacting with items. So while Mixtape does have some degree of traversal, it's very weak because you're basically forced. There are guardrails. You can't go wrong. You're always forced into the right direction. So it's basically, there's basically no point for traversal because you cannot go wrong. So the traversal there is very weak. The acquisition of information, you're forced into just talking to these characters. You can't go wrong with it. And the acquisition of key items, you're always forced into acquiring the items. It's unfortunate that all of these elements are implemented so weak. I want you to think about your own visual novels. And again, at the end of the discussion here, I will bring up two examples. So how does the game communicate those requirements to the player? Think about that. And it is unfortunate that we see Mixtape had the opportunity to leave some degree of open-endedness so that the player would be able to engage in a more free way, which would turn it more into a game. But because they're basically forced to just press a button prompt on the screen to progress, those elements, those key gameplay components are not implemented well at all. So what is the challenge here in visual novels? Visual novels tend to derive their challenge from the player needing to understand what is asked of them so that the player may navigate to certain locations and interact with certain characters or key items. If a character says, I need you to drive over to the Shibuya district and speak to Detective Miyazaki, right? So now you let the player open some degree of traversal, whether they are walking there, whether they are clicking on a map on a screen, that is a degree of traversal. You have to let the player do that, okay? And that tends to be the challenge of visual novels, is the player has to understand the information and respond accordingly. So the core appeal, every game genre has core appeal. Every game has a core appeal. You have to understand, as a developer, you have to understand what the core appeal of your product is. So with visual novels, the core appeal is basically, it's always a compelling story and interesting characters. You are watching the story play out. It feels like you are going on this journey with those characters to get through to the end of the story. So we will discuss the story very briefly. And a story has a beginning point and an end point. We all know what the beginning point is. We have a feeling of what the end point should be, but the writer always knows what the end point is. But every story has a beginning and an end. And the viewer's feelings must be aligned with the primary protagonist's goals in order to have a compelling story. So again, if you want to have a compelling story, the viewer's feelings must be aligned with the primary protagonist's goals, what the primary protagonists want. So we'll take a look at Mixtape, for example. And again, just going to gloss over this. So the story in Mixtape is the primary protagonist, the character. She wants to move to a city so she can stalk a famous person, so she can play the music tape for that person and become a music producer magically because she played a mixtape for her. Already this is insipid. very immature, which is typical of a teenager. So I think that's relatable because teenagers are insipid and immature. As a result, this character, she cannot join her friends on the road trip. There was a road trip they intended to go on together, so this prevents that. So the goals of the characters overall in the story: they want to attend a party, to drink alcohol, they need to acquire alcohol. There is a character that gets grounded for bad behavior. The characters acquire alcohol, the characters run away. There's the character that is grounded runs away from being grounded. The characters attend a party, there is a forest fire. So how do these events, this is the plot, right? A plot is a series of events. How do these events contribute to the end point of the story? How do they affect this character being able to go move to another city in order to play a mixtape and become a music producer? I'm going to let you answer that. Did you answer? Okay. If you answered nothing, if you answered there is no correlation between the events, the plot, and the end goal, if you answered that the events of the story have zero impact on the ending of the story, please give yourself a thick fat 100 points. You can grade your own paper. These events do not have any impact on the story. There is no logical flow to the story. You can take away any and all parts of the plot, take away everything that we learn about these characters through its 2.5-hour run, and the end point is exactly the same. The journey that you go on with these characters is exactly the same. This is not compelling storytelling. And the whole core appeal, again, the core appeal of visual novels is a compelling story and interesting characters. These characters are not interesting. They are very poorly written. They are grinding to have to listen to. It's unpleasant, and I'm really frustrated that the games industry is saying that this is some kind of masterpiece. So let's think about the reason for engagement. What is the reason for engagement? The reason that the player engages with the software title. Visual novels tend to have, not always, but they sometimes have multi-branching paths. Visual novels tend to have interactivity in terms of building relationships with other characters. As you will see in one of our examples, you'll see meters for characters, and interacting with characters in a certain way builds up those meters. That is gamification. That is a gameplay mechanic. Finding items, learning lore that contributes to the overall experience, those are reasons for engagement. Mixtape does not really have that much, and if you have seen it, I want you to consider, look at Mixtape for yourself and consider what is the reason for engagement? What is the reason why the player themselves would play the game rather than just watch it on YouTube? What are the value of visuals? The audio-visual stimulation. The point of audio-visual stimulation is to inform the player about the current momentary state so that the player can make informed decisions. So let's make an example of a game that many people know of. So the player must understand the momentary state, and the momentary state is the state in which the game actually is, you know? The momentary state, the player must understand the momentary state and make a decision. What is the reward for assessing the situation correctly and making a good decision? This is something that developers need to consider. What is the reward for assessing the situation correctly and making a good decision? I want you to apply this when you look at Mixtape, you compare it to other visual novels for yourself. I want you to consider that. What is the reward for assessing the situation correctly and making a good decision? And what is the penalty for assessing the situation incorrectly and making a poor decision? In general, with visual novels, the penalty generally is wasted time. You've wasted time and the game is not progressing. In non-visual novel games like Super Mario Bros., if you see an enemy approach, let's say for example a Goomba is approaching, you judge the movement of the enemy, the velocity, you judge your own movement, you judge the environment, and you press the jump button when you think the time is right. You have the choice as a player to either avoid the enemy, which is easy, it's easy to avoid an enemy, or you attack and defeat the enemy, which is a bit more difficult. But the player is rewarded for assessing the situation correctly and making a good decision. They get to get out of a dangerous situation, they can defeat the enemy. And the penalty for not assessing the situation correctly, for misjudging their own speed, for misjudging the enemy's speed, for misjudging the environment, if they hit their head on a block and drop back down, the penalty is the player gets hit by the enemy or they fall down a pit. The player is able to understand the momentary state. I want you to consider the momentary state, because that is something that visual novels, even when they have less gameplay, they all have a momentary state, and players need to be able to understand what that is. So let's discuss mechanical engagement. Mechanical engagement allows the player to form an emotional connection to the character that they are playing as. And in general, I've never seen anyone discuss this, but this is something very important to discuss on a deeper level with game design philosophy, is the mechanical engagement. The way that players engage, they control their character, they look at the character's menus, they level up their character, all of that stuff. It allows the player to form an emotional connection to the character. That is why we feel so connected, why we feel strongly about these characters. There is a sense of kinsmanship. And the way that players control their characters defines this relationship. This is not a kind of relationship that players have, that people can have with any other form of medium, right? You read a book, you watch a movie, it is not the same. You do not form the same kind of emotional connection because you are not controlling those characters. And in video games, you control the character. You form an emotional connection to that character. And in Mixtape, that is absent because all you do is follow the prompt on the screen. That is all you do. There's a very low opportunity, very minimal amount of opportunity for players to form an emotional connection with these characters, because there is a complete and utter lack of understanding of how mechanical engagement allows players to form an emotional connection to their characters. As a brief example, one of the games that I shipped is Silver Falls Gaiden Deathly Delusion Destroyers on the Nintendo 3DS. And part of that game and the mechanics there, that is a battle RPG. It focuses on battles with a really, really deep mechanics for developing your team. But you are developing your characters as a huge roster, and the skill system is based on the day of the week. And the day of the week determines which abilities characters have available to them. And subconsciously, people will find certain characters are more useful during a certain day of the week. Other characters are less useful during a certain day of the week. Some people hate Mondays. Some people love Mondays. And so I crafted each character to organically, mechanically tell a story through that. And that allows people to form a connection, because some people might say, oh man, I hate Mondays too. This character also hates Mondays. That is a form of building a connection to those characters. And it is something that developers can use, if they think about it, to elevate the experience. So, do you remember all the nostalgia stuff that I showed you earlier? Now I want to ask you a question, and then I would like you to answer honestly. If you know the answer to this, please answer. And even if you don't know the answer, just throw a guess out. How did I use those items to reinforce the message of this video? I'll give you time to answer here. How did I use those nostalgic items to reinforce the message of this video? If you answered, I did not use the items to reinforce the message of this video, please give yourself a thick fat 100 points. I did not use those items to reinforce the message of this video. I didn't use any of the nostalgia here. I didn't use it in any meaningful way. I only used it in a superficial and manipulative way. There was no point to having any of that nostalgia. The point of this video would have been the exact same, whether I made use of nostalgia or not. And I want you to consider that, how that applies to Mixtape. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at two examples now. I'm going to boot that up here. Okay, we are taking a look at Danganronpa 2. I am playing this on the Nintendo Switch. We have an environment here. You can see I can move the camera around, and I can choose to interact with different characters here. I can inspect different elements. Let's go ahead and inspect the monitor, and we see the character's reaction to that. We can talk to characters and we'll see what characters say, but I'll go ahead and skip on through this. But this allows us to gain an understanding of the current momentary state. Let's go ahead and open up our menu here. And we can see that we have a map that allows us to understand the momentary state. We have a number of different ways to interact with the environment. We have things that we can pick up. We can take a look at the report card for the different characters that we can interact with. You can see there's a high degree of interaction here with the mechanics of the game for characters that I have not gained a deeper relationship with in terms of the mechanics. You can see that I have question marks and I haven't learned enough about those characters yet. There is some sort of indicator here that lets me understand that there is going to be some type of growth when it comes to the relationship of these characters. Let's go ahead and see what our traversal looks like. Here we see an interaction between characters, and these characters are generally, they're caricatures in a way because they have larger-than-life personalities, which makes them interesting and quirky. They are fun to interact with. The core appeal of visual novels: interesting characters, compelling story. In order to engage with all the elements that I must, in order to progress the plot, I have to move the camera around. I must speak to these characters. You can see that I need to interact with them. But we also learn there's some sort of viewing monitor. There's a camera that's spying on us. We can learn about the lore and see there's something mysterious, something that is a bit creepy going on in terms of cameras watching me everywhere, and that's something you learn by exploring the environments here. This character possesses interesting assets. Here we take a look at our form of traversal here. Something like this really contributes a lot to world building, and we are free to go to many different locations. And in order to progress the plot, we have to understand the momentary state. We have to understand what does the game expect of us as players in order to progress the plot. What do they expect us to do? If we feel like we've already investigated certain areas, we will have to find more areas to investigate. This is entirely up to the player to understand that concept and to make appropriate decisions. This is not something that Mixtape does. Next, we will briefly take a look at Digimon Survive. This game does actually have a battle system as well that is like a tactical RPG battle system. You can see that very similarly, I sort of move the camera around an environment and I speak with characters. And the core appeal of this is a mystery, very interesting story, but in Digimon Survive, players must play through the game multiple times in an attempt to save the lives of characters that die throughout the course of the plot. Something like that is engaging and interesting because players have to understand the momentary state, and players have to make decisions in order to prevent the deaths of those characters after they gain an understanding of that. Here we've reached a point where, as a player, I can make a decision, and I feel that this would have an impact on the events of the game. Run while you can. Get closer and talk. There appears to be some kind of dangerous creature. I will get closer and talk and see. And the game will follow a course of plot based on my decision as a player. Here, as the events of the story unfold, we learn more about what's going on in this world. We are trying to unravel the mystery. It's interesting as the characters gain more information. We see the characters react to the events of the story and the plot. One event leads to the other, which will eventually lead to the ending, the conclusion of the story. Something like this is quite compelling and interesting. It keeps me engaged, and I think I'm just going to try and go headstrong here. I'm going to run straight into danger, and we'll see how my decisions impact the outcome of the story here. So I hope this has been interesting to you. It looks like I might be getting my Digimon here, and I don't think we'll have time to take a look at the battle system today. So thank you very much for spending some time with me today. I hope this has been informative and interesting to you. And again, if this episode reaches 20,000 views, then I will do an episode where I break down the story and the writing of Mixtape, why it's so awful, and what you can learn from it. So if you would like to see that, you can share the video, use your algorithm juice. Thank you very much. Please take care of yourselves. Be well. If you are an artist, a writer, a game developer, please strive to do your best. Please strive for excellence. Take care of yourselves. Be well.